Hello and welcome to What's the Story? We're an inquisitive bunch of hosts from the What's the Story team on a mission to uncover stories about faith and courage from everyday people. And to help us do just that, we get the privilege to chat with amazing guests and delve into their faith journey, the hurdles they've overcome, and the life lessons they have learned along the way. Now, if you enjoy our podcast, don't forget to subscribe and sign up for our newsletter on our website, which is what'sthestorypodcast.com. It's your direct line to the latest episodes and detailed show notes, and they all get delivered straight to your inbox. And the best part, it's absolutely free. What's the Story is brought to you by Crowd Church. We understand that stepping into a traditional church might not be everybody's cup of tea. And that's where Crowd Church steps in, providing a digital sanctuary, a safe space to explore the Christian faith, where you can engage in meaningful conversations rather than just simply spectating. So whether you are new to the Christian faith or are in search of a new church family, we invite you to visit us at www.crowd.church. And if you've got any questions, just drop us an email at hello@crowd.church. We're here to help and would genuinely love to connect with you. And now, without further ado, let's meet your host and our very special guest for today.
Hello and welcome to What's the Story? My name is Saga and today I am talking with Grace Krasinski all the way from Vancouver in beautiful British Columbia, Canada. I had the pleasure of meeting Grace when I was in Vancouver this summer and at my sister's church, and it's wonderful to have you here with us today, Grace. Thank you so much for being here. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure. It's our pleasure. So, Grace, you're from Vancouver. Tell us a bit about what home life is like for you. I know you've got 2 kids, and so tell us a bit more about that.
Well, let's see. Home life is busy with the 2 kids. My son is 10. He's in grade 5. And my daughter is 4. She has not yet started school. And so there's 6 years difference between them. So it makes life pretty interesting. She's a lot more independent than he is, which is an interesting dynamic when it's the younger one, who's a lot more able to occupy herself. She loves to chase her brother around, and she's very perceptive. So she knows all the right buttons to press to get a reaction. So it's entertaining, but it's can be challenging.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Life. Yeah, right now.
Yeah, it keeps you on your toes, I bet.
Yes, absolutely. And it's teaching my son, how to be a servant. Because he is the elder one, and he does know better. But it's really hard when she's just pushing those buttons, and she. Wow. Yeah.
That's great. So, Grace, share with us briefly about how you became a Christian.
Sure. So, my parents actually met at church. My mother, she got saved when she was in college. She was born and raised in the Philippines, and so she went to Singapore, and then she came to Canada, and she met my dad at church. So I was, that was the path I was on since before I was born. I remember being really little, being around 5 years old, when I was really, really scared a lot. I remember I was just in my grandmother's basement, actually, and I was just scared of everything. I was worried about going to hell, and but I didn't really understand anything. But I remember praying that night to God and saying, God, please protect me from hell. And then I didn't have a lot of fear after that. I remember I was able to sleep well after that, but it wasn't until I was 8 years old when I really fully grasped the gospel. And it was August 4th, 1997, and it was late at night, and the Lord was really working on my heart. And I had, heard the gospel so many times because I grew up in church. And I remember going to the window and looking outside and saying and asking God to, come into my heart, to be my savior, that I knew that without the sacrifice of Jesus, that I would be going to hell. And so that day I accepted him as savior, and I have, served him and sought him. Well, I've tried to ever since. And been in, well, I've never left church or anything like that. It's very, very straightforward.
Yeah.
Story.
What does serving, or what has it looked like serving him for you?
Serving has really been about just doing right, just doing what I know is right. There is, and because I went to a public school growing up, and you're surrounded by people. Well, when they're not Christians, you're surrounded by, messages and people saying, yeah, you can be whatever you want to be. You can do whatever you do, be yourself. But what is yourself? Because yourself changes, going back to my son, 1 week he liked shrimp, the next week he didn't like shrimp. So which is, but I mean, that's a very shallow thing, but there's a lot of things that are deeper in you, and we change, and so, serving the Lord has really meant, well, first off, it's right to go to church. It's right to read your Bible, and it's right to pray. Those are the things that you should do, and the Lord blesses that kind of obedience, right? When maybe you don't feel like it, but that it's right, and you do it, and the Lord, as you obey him, he purifies your motives, he purifies the path that you're taking, so that you're no longer giving or attending or reading your Bible or praying just because you have to. You're actually doing it because you've seen him work in your life. You really love him, and you know that you can't survive the next step, survive the next minute, without him. And so that's what serving has meant to me. It's just being obedient to what you know is right, and allowing the Lord to work as you do that.
So you've been doing that from a very young age. And do you have siblings?
I do. I have a younger sister and a younger brother.
And were they, so they were brought up in a Christian home as well, and you were all serving the Lord, walking with him. So what were those relationships like for you with your brother and sister?
They're very close. My sister, she is exactly actually 18 months younger than me.
Okay.
And, we really, we grew up watching my mother listen to sermons. We watched her read her Bible and pray all the time. And my father too is very particular about doctrine, and a studier. He likes to go into detail and study things. And so, we come by it really honestly, because my brother is a very big studier. He knows the Bible really well. And we have that as a, not just being siblings, but we have that as a connection to each other as well. But yeah, my brother, sister, and I, we are very close. We might not tell each other everything, but in all circumstances of life, we have always been there for each other. And I know that if I need something at a drop of the hat, I can go to either of them, and they'll do everything in their power to help me. And they both love the Lord and seek after him. And that's, there's this quote, I think it's Calvin and Hobbes, the comic. Yeah. He says to his stuffed animal, he says, "I don't relate to the people I'm related to." And it's just a funny, cute little quote, but it's kind of sad too. But and I have relatives like that, but with my brother and sister, relating them on a physical level because we're related, a cultural level because we grew up in the same house, but then on a spiritual level, it just makes it that much sweeter,
Yeah, for
and you
sure.
get that much closer. So
Yeah, that's very special. It's a
it is.
blessing. It's for sure a
Absolutely.
blessing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I remember when we talked earlier, you said about your sister's role. It was quite instrumental, wasn't it, in helping you meet your husband? So do you want to share a bit
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah. My sister started a job at a restaurant here in Vancouver. And she actually started the same day that my husband started, albeit he was in a much higher position than she was. And yeah, I went to visit her one day, and she said, "Oh, this is Michael. Yeah, he started the same day as I did." Um, and I said, "Oh, okay, that's fine." And I was sitting at a table. Um, I was sitting at a table, and he had just finished work, and he sat down next to me, and I made some sort of I don't even really remember what it was. I just made some sort of a joke about my sister, and he didn't laugh, so I thought he was a jerk. Um, Whatever, that guy's not funny. Like, I'm hilarious. Why wouldn't he find me funny? Um, and that was kind of it for a little bit until until one day actually had dinner at the restaurant with a friend of mine, and I went up to the line where my sister was cooking, and Michael was there, and I just made a face at him because I didn't think very much of him, and said hi to my sister, and then went off and sat down, and so I had dinner with my friend and went home, and then my sister comes home, and she's my sister, so she tells me everything, especially if it relates to me. So she said, "Michael called you a really rude name." And so she just told me the story where after I had left, he said, "Oh, is that your sister?" And then he just made a comment. And I'm not going to say it because he hated this story. He really, really hated this story. So, but of course she told me. And then I just was like, well, what? I don't like that guy anyway. So now I don't like him even more. And, but on New Year's, was it New Year's? Oh, it was, anyways. I was back at the restaurant, and he came up to me because, of course, she told him that she told him that she told
Your
me.
response, yeah.
Yeah, and then he's like, I was joking. I was just trying to get a rise out of your sister. Like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it at all. And I'm like, yeah, whatever, dude. And I just turned around and walked away. And then he sent me a message on Facebook later. He said, "Look, Grace, I actually didn't mean it. Like, if you were really offended, I'm sorry." And I said, I'm like, I know I acted all cool and stuff, but I did forgive you when you asked me sincerely, because I asked you when yeah. And he said, "Well, that's very Christ-like of you." And so, and I was in this really, really weird phase where I had been learning, because you grow up in church, you learn about the goodness of God. God is love. But I was in this phase in my Christian walk where I was learning about how God is a consuming fire. And so he said, "Well, that's very Christ-like of you." And I said, "Well, it's also Christ-like to chase people out of the temple with whips." And, and he's like, "Well, okay." And so then so we got into this theological discussion, and I realized that he was a Christian. And I guess him and my sister, they would sing hymns on when they were working together, and change the lyrics sometimes about his cat. But but yeah, he was he was a Christian. He was born and raised in church as well. His dad was a pastor. Both his grandpas were pastors, and it snowballed from there. And my sister called it when I said, "Oh yeah, Michael and I are arguing about Jesus on Facebook." She's like, "Well, you're gonna fall in love and get married." And so,
And lo and
well,
behold.
she called it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's cool. So what did happen then? How did you end up falling in love and getting married?
We just, we genuinely, well, you start off with a theological discussion, and I automatically knew he was a Christian, and those conversations really developed to the point where it's like, well, now let's hang out. and hang out. And we would just, we would go for walks downtown Vancouver, and we would just be talking. And we just got along so well. And it's something that people have always noted about us, that we just would get along. And my aunt calls it, we would circle our wagons, which I don't really understand, but I kind of do. You know what I mean? Where we would just come together and it would just be done. And
Yeah.
everything would be, we were just cohesive and good. And so we just started hanging out. And then it got to a point where it's like, well, what are we going to do? Like, are we going to start dating or what? And so, yeah, we, started dating, and that was on January 15th. And then, January 15th, 2010. And then, in February, or no, it wasn't even in February, it was a week later. And he said, look, and I know how the Lord had really worked on him, because he said, I can't be in a relationship if it's not serious. I'm not here to have fun. I'm either in a relationship to get married or nothing, And it actually had this was actually one of his things, or one of the things that the Lord had really put on him, because he had been in relationships before and none of them worked out. And he had decided 2 years before he met me that he wasn't going to date anyone who he wasn't going to marry. And he stuck to it. He had purposed that in his heart, and he stuck to it. And so I told him, I'm like, well, I'm not in a relationship to just have fun too. My greatest ambition in life, which I say that really sardonically, but in all sincerity, I wanted I only ever wanted to be a wife and a mother. And I don't know I don't know if that's just my Christian upbringing, just the way I was raised or what, but that was just that's all I wanted to do, was be a wife and a mother. And so you can't be a wife and a mother and just have fun in the dating world, So when he talked to me about that, I'm like, yeah, I'm not interested in just having fun either. I didn't hang out with you and start dating you because I thought, yeah, you're just a good time. Like, we obviously have a lot of chemistry, but I'm in this for the long term. And so that really set the tone, and that really, and then you're on the same page, and and then after that, it's just learning about values, and our values all aligned. Because I told him, I'm like, I want to homeschool my children. I don't want them in public school. He's like, yeah, I don't want our kids in public school either, and yeah, and we were going to church together, and all these things, and like I said, our values aligned, and it was a kind of a done deal after that conversation, which was, so we're like, well, when should we get married then? And it's like, well, we just started dating, so maybe not right now. but we wound up getting married in August of 2010, because we wanted his dad to perform the wedding ceremony, and it was either in August or November, and we were tired of being apart, so we were like, let's do August. So we, along with a lot of help, put the wedding together in about
very quickly.
Yeah.
And
that was kind of it.
Yeah. So you've said a few times that you guys were aligned and that you were on the same page. Was he born and raised in a Christian home as well?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was. So 4 months after he was born, his parents met at Prairie, which is a Bible school. I think it's in. Oh man,
I want to say Alberta.
As well. Yeah, I want to say Alberta too, but I'm like, because it's a one. But no, So his parents met there, and his father was called to be a pastor. And so 4 months after my husband was born, they left for Austria to be missionaries there for a little bit. He was born and raised in a Christian home. Both his parents are still serving. His dad is, he's a retired pastor, but he's still, I don't even know if retired is the right word, because he's still very active in his church. He's an elder there, part of all the big decisions and whatnot, and he still preaches a lot and is very much a servant. And yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
So you guys got married in the August?
In August, yeah, we got married in August, and it was good. I mean, the first year of marriage is, for any newlyweds listening, it's wonderful, but it's also challenging. I think with all blessings in life,
Yeah.
all real blessings, I should say, in life, that everything worth having will be tested,
Yeah.
and it's all the better for that. But we figured things out in the first year of marriage, and our son came along in 2013, and our daughter came along in 2019. And through all that, attending church together, serving, I do enjoy teaching. And so teaching Sunday school to kids, I'm very passionate about young girls, because I was one, and I know how hard it can be. So I have a heart for them, and so teaching there, attending church together, working, and just living, and just being together. And it sounds so simple, but it's a real blessing, to be able to do that.
To do life, yeah. Yeah.
You know,
So you enjoyed, was it 10, 11 years of marriage? Is that right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So we married in 2010, um, and August 2010, and we didn't quite make it to August 2021, but we did celebrate 10 years together in 2020. We were supposed to go to Las Vegas, because I've actually never been, and so we had booked a trip, and we were gonna go see, I think it was Cirque du Soleil, and just sightseeing, interesting things there. And then, of course, it was 2020, so we had to cancel the whole thing. And so we actually just wound up going to Whistler, up here. For those who don't know, it's this. It's mostly known for skiing. A lot of the Olympics happened, but in the summer it's really, really nice too.
Yeah.
There's beautiful trails. The drive up there is amazing, because you drive through mountains and you can look over the edges and see a really beautiful blue water.
That's right. They call it the sea to sky highway, don't they? Which says it all.
It's just, I just love that drive.
It's beautiful.
So we went up to Whistler and spent a few days there together for our 10th anniversary. And I mean, you're just together, so it's fine. You don't have to go see Cirque du Soleil, or go to any fancy restaurant in Vegas. You can just, if you're together, it's fine. So yeah, that was 2020. But in 2019, actually, in 2019, our daughter was born in March. And then in June, I think it was May or June, he started having chest pains, which we thought, okay. But it got to just like little things, you just think they're going to go away. And then it got to the point where he wasn't able to walk as long, because he would have trouble breathing. And of course, that at that point you're like, okay, this is something we got to go to the doctor. And then he went to the doctor, and there was water in his lungs, and which they promptly drained, and they didn't know what the cause of it was. And after And so eventually they had to do a surgery where they actually went in and looked in his lungs. And in October, we found out of 2019, we found out that he had lung cancer, which was, sad and difficult at first. And I think it's a very natural human reaction to, freak out or just feel the full weight of those negative emotions at first. And it was scary, certainly. But then you just remember, who you serve and who's in control, and you kind of a bit. But we were really blessed in that he happened to have this a DNA. I think they called it a mutation.
Okay.
This DNA thing where he was able to take this oral medication for the cancer. And I forget, it's a very small percentage of people who are able to take that, but he was one of them. So that was, a huge blessing. He didn't have to go on chemo or anything. He could still work. And so he started on that medication, right away. And it really improved his health, and really helped him for a time. And so he was on that medication from October 2019. Of course, we celebrated our 10 years in August of 2020. And then it wasn't until the end of 2020 that he started just feeling off a bit, getting headaches and stuff. But he was mostly fine,
Yeah.
And so, and he kept on doing his regular checkups, and they had actually decreased his checkups because the medication was shrinking the
working,
cancer.
yeah.
He seemed to be doing, really well. But then in March 2021, he went for a checkup, and he came home and told me that the medication was no longer working, and that he would need to start chemo pretty quick. So that was obviously unwelcome news. But it's one of those things that the reality of it kind of just creeps into you slowly,
Yeah.
before you really realize the full weight. And when he found that out, he took a week off of work. And our daughter's birthday was on March 21st. And he had, and as the week after that appointment, as the week progressed, he was getting more and more tired, and he was lying down a lot more. And so we went to celebrate my daughter's birthday on, I think it was the Sunday. But he drove us there, but he couldn't drive home. So, and then the next day, I noticed he was slurring his words. And so I called his doctor and took him to the hospital. And eventually they did was it a CT? No, an MRI. And they found the cancer had reached his brain. And they did have a plan for that, but he was decreasing. His health was decreasing, so rapidly that I think that the doctors just couldn't really keep up. Especially, here in Canada when you're waiting, when you're waiting for a time to get an MRI, Like it was a week. He went into the hospital and they're like, okay, he needs an MRI. Well, that took them a week to get that MRI.
Wow.
So yeah, the cancer had spread to his brain, and they were going to check to see if it was on his spinal cord as well, if it had traveled from the lungs up into his brain. But as this is happening, his ability to eat was diminishing. His ability to walk was diminishing. All the basic things he couldn't do.
Was he still at home at this point, or did he stay at the hospital?
He was in and out of the hospital.
Okay.
He was in and out. He was initially he was in there for about a week. And then he insisted on coming home. And then a few days later he had to go back, and was in there for about 2 weeks.
Okay.
He was in there for 2 weeks, and then he came home for about a week, and then he went back for 2 weeks. Yeah, so he was in and out of the hospital throughout this time. And it was about 6 weeks of just absolute chaos, and it was really quite a blessing. Some of the good things I will say is that we had a lot of like social workers come to support us. They gave us things for our shower so that he could take a shower. We had nurses 3 times a day to help with his care. That when he was home it was about 2 weeks that he was home, that was really helpful. His mother came up, his father came up, his sister who lives in California came up, his other sister who lives in Vancouver, she was around constantly. My sister, of course, was around, my parents as well. And everyone was here, supporting us and, doing everything they could, taking care of the children and taking care of me. And, it was very, very hectic. And when he was in the hospital, we would take turns to go and see him every day. And there was still quite heavy COVID restrictions, so we couldn't go. It was very particular, when we went and who we went with, and there were all these documents that we had to fill out and sign and whatnot. But so that complicated things a bit more, but we were able to do that. Yeah.
Wow. So you were saying earlier that his eating was diminishing, his energy, he was feeling more fatigued, and so he just keep going downhill?
Yeah.
From there?
Yeah. Yeah. And I hadn't noticed that he had been slurring his words until that Monday, the first day he went into the hospital, because he had just been sleeping at home the whole time. He'd just been lying down and sleeping. So I didn't talk to him much except for, hey, do you need anything? And just one word answers are okay. But yeah, it got to the point where he could mouth things, but but I couldn't hear it, but his voice wouldn't.
The voice was gone, yeah.
Yeah, and he couldn't eat anything because his ability to do those things, I'm not sure if it was, I'm really bad at science. If you tell me anything about anatomy, it just goes, whoosh, I can't remember. But the doctor would come and they would do exercises with him, like with his hands. They would say, push on my hands, or they would check to see his how he would be able to control his tongue. And so, like one day, for example, I brought him a drink, and they said, you can't give that to him because he won't be able to swallow it.
Right.
And I'm not too sure if it was because the instructions from his brain weren't getting to his tongue to be able to do that, or if it was just physically because there was possibly cancer in his spinal cord or something.
Yeah.
Probably sound very ignorant, but his abilities to physically do things diminished quite a bit. But one of the blessings was that his mental capacity, or at least his ability to remember, was still very much present. So he recognized all of us whenever we came. His mom told me that she would tell him that I would be coming the next day, and he would be happy and he would smile and he would respond positively, and he would see his sisters and he would smile at them. He would see his children, he would smile at them and react. And so in his mind, I know in his mind, there were these moments of clarity that he had. They weren't all the time, but he remembered us. And I've heard from other people who have had relatives or known someone who with brain, things going on in their brain where they don't remember, and that can be quite difficult and quite sad. But my husband, he did, even though he had lost his physical abilities, at the end he couldn't walk. I'm not sure he could have lifted his hands, but he could at least look at us and remember us. So that was a blessing.
Yeah. And also great that you had such a network of support around you in those days. So what happened then? How did he, in the end, how did he pass away? And what was that like for you? Where were you? Were you with him?
Yeah. So this was thankfully my first and only time thus far, going through this. And so I didn't really know, and everything was changing every day. No 2 days were alike. And you can just imagine just the chaos that kind of a thing caused. So he came home for 2 weeks, because, well, I'll just back up a bit because I think this is really funny. He was in Surrey Memorial Hospital, and he escaped one night because he just didn't want to be there. This is what I mean by he was mentally clear. Like he could still walk at that point. This was about 4 weeks, before he eventually passed. So he could still walk, and I don't know how he escaped, honestly, but they couldn't find him. He escaped, and I was sleeping, but they called me. It was like 1 a.m. A police officer actually found him and brought him back. But the nurse called me. She's like, "I think you need to take him home because he
Doesn't want to be here."
But they didn't, like the doctors and the nurses, they didn't want to send him home because like it's gonna be too much for you. Like the amount of care he needs is gonna be too much. But clearly he needed to come home. Like he escaped. Everyone who knows that, they're like, yeah, that's the most Michael thing I've ever heard, that he escaped from the hospital. He was a big guy too. He was 6'5". I really don't know how he did it. But anyway, so he came home after that. The next day I picked him up and brought him home. And he was there for 2 weeks. And it was encouraging a little bit because, I got him to eat. He was just happy to be surrounded by his children. Again, we would sit and watch TV together like we had done before. It was difficult at night, just because of his medication. He couldn't sleep. But he would come home and, but he would rest, and we could be together like that. Just like normal is what I mean by like that.
Yeah.
And that's, but as the days progressed, he was getting steadily worse. we were blessed with really beautiful weather that month. It was a very sunny March and April that year. And his parents would come, and we would just be just in my backyard, just be together. And the kids would run around and play, on the trampoline, and he would just be surrounded by family. And it was a Thursday, and he needed help to go down the stairs, and he needed help to get up the stairs. So his dad was doing that. And his dad was also, we got his favorite dessert is key lime pie, or one of his favorite desserts, I should say. He just loved pie. But I just remember his dad feeding him, key lime pie and helping him drink his coffee. But my daughter had actually gotten up from her nap, and she was running around, and it was just before dinner, and Michael, he looked at her, and then he started weeping, and real weeping, like sobbing. And it was just the saddest moment for all of us. And, we've wondered, or we've asked why, because he kept looking at her, and she was 2 at the time. She was running around and just being, her happy little self, not understanding, but going to him, because she absolutely adored him. And he just looked at her and just sobbed. And, in that moment, all of us surrounding him, we really just saw the depth of where we were at and what we were facing. Because when everything is chaotic around you, and there's just so much movement and no time for just stillness, you're just trying to get everything done so you can get to the next moment. But because Michael stopped and looked at her and cried, that's when we all stopped and saw what he was facing and what we would all be facing. And so the next day he tried to get out of bed, but he wound up lying on the floor, and he couldn't get up. And the doctors told me that, if there's a point where he can't get up, then it's time, then you need to call us. We need to take him back to the hospital. So I called the ambulance, and they took him to the hospital. And it was very rapid from that point to where he maybe ate for maybe 3 more days, and then he just couldn't. So there was about a week. He was brought up to the oncology, I want to say department, or the oncology floor. But then they, oh man, I'm forgetting the word, but then they brought him into the next one, which is
like palliative care.
That one. Yeah. That one. They brought him in there. And I remember the day we went in there, that was a Saturday. So it would have been a week later after he went in. And they said, the nurse there, she said, "Do you have any children?" I said, "Yes, I have 2. And she says, "You need to bring them tomorrow." And I said, "Well, I don't know. I was thinking I might bring them on, Monday or Tuesday." She's like, "No, the managers aren't here on the weekends, and you'll have a lot more trouble bringing them. I'm here tomorrow. You need to bring them tomorrow." And I'm okay. And you have to understand that I was just in so much just pain personally that I don't know if I can face my children, if I can bring them into this, like, I don't know if I can bear that. But the nurse says, no, you need to bring them tomorrow. And so I said, okay, I'll bring them tomorrow. And, that morning the next morning was Sunday morning, and I was sad and scared and crying. And so I just sent out messages to certain people who I know could get a hold of God and say, can you please pray for my children, especially because we're going to go see Michael today. And so I brought them there, and it was a really, really nice visit for them. My daughter, I thought that she would be nervous and afraid in a really strange place, but she wasn't. She ran around, she colored a picture, she sat beside Michael, and she said, "Daddy, Daddy," and he looked at her and could smile at her. And my son, he was much more, he knew more, so he was just much more uncomfortable. But he could stand there, and it was hard for him to see his father in such a diminished state. But he could be there and see him. And it's just one of those things, one of those graces that God gave us, is, to put it on that nurse's heart to say, look, you need to bring your children today or tomorrow. And it wound up being the last time they saw him, which wasn't, it was never my intention, but, for our last visit, but I think it's also better that I didn't know. And I think it's better, at least that my son didn't know that would be the last time. It was a very beautiful last visit. So that was Monday, that was Sunday. And on Thursday we had made all the, by Thursday we had made all the arrangements to take him to the hospice. But I went to see him as well. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead, but I had to back up a bit. On Tuesday, I went to go see him and spend the day with him in the hospital. And, I sat together with him for a long time. And I'm a knitter, so I would sit in the hospital and just sit beside him and knit and and talk to him a little bit, tell him about things. The doctor came in because, at that point, not a lot of people were answering our questions. We didn't have a lot of answers. And the doctor came in. She said, "Is there anything you want to know, or how can I help you guys?" And I asked her how long he had, and she said, it looks like a few weeks, just based on physical things. And I thought, oh, okay. And that made sense with the way things had gone. I had accepted that he would be going, maybe accept is not the right word, but I had understood, this was the way it was going to go. In all the chaos, that was, I understood. And so after she left, Michael and I, we just sat next to each other, and he looked at me and he said, or he asked me if I was sad. And I said, yeah, I am sad. But God has been really good to us. And it was, in the shower a few days before, and I was thinking, it was just a moment of quiet in the shower. And I had been thinking about the situation I was in, and wondering where the Lord was in all this. And I thought, and so I thought about how our daughter came, when she did, because we hadn't intended for our children to be 6 years apart. It just how it worked out. but she came at the right time, for him to enjoy her and to just the apple of his eye, and then COVID as well, just the way it was, allowed us to be home together in the last year. And that, in itself is a huge blessing. And as well as my husband's last job that he got to work with, a really close friend, a friend who was a Christian, which is was a huge blessing for him. And, when actually, it was one of his concerns when he first found out that there was cancer in his brain. He's like, I wonder if I can go back to work. And I'm like, what a funny thing to ask. But, he enjoyed going to work, and that was his last job. And that, is such a blessing. And even throughout his illness, right before he had to go into the hospital, there was this one night where I was lying in bed and I was reading a book. And I was reading about this rich, wealthy character who had a lot of power and was in a position of great authority. And this person was, in the course of less than a year, they are, enslaved on the other side of the world, and complete opposite circumstances. And I remember thinking that night, I'm like, that's interesting, right? I'm like, how life can change like that. And we don't often think about that because it often doesn't happen. But I remember noting it and thinking about it. And then my husband came into the room and I'm like, okay, well, it's time for bed. And he pulled me into his arms and we're just hugging. And I remember falling asleep there and just being so thankful and so happy. And I remember that snuggle. And that was a few weeks before, everything started going down. And I just remember it so well, just being so grateful for that moment. And then, in the hospital, when he first found out, when he could still stand up and walk, and we found out that he had cancer in his brain, and I helped him go take a shower, when he could still function at this point. And him and we stopped and looked at each other, and he just pulled me into his arms and he hugged me. And I'm 5'6", and like I said, he was 6'5", and I remember him, holding me in his arms, and he put his head, gently on mine. And that was the last hug that he could ever give me. But I remember being in that hug and the Holy Spirit saying, cherish this, remember this, and did I know it was the last time? No, not at all. Neither did I know that snuggle would be the last snuggle that I would really remember. The Holy Spirit, came and just said, rest in this, cherish this. And the night before he went back to the hospital, for the last time, we were lying in bed, and he put his hand on my belly. I was lying next to him. He put his hand on my belly, and I put my hand over his. And I actually took a picture of it. But I also remember the Holy Spirit saying, cherish this, because at that point he was, like I've said a bunch of times now, he was losing abilities for everything. But he remembered that I was his wife, and that, to put his hand there, on my belly like that, and just to cherish that moment. And so, going back to, when I started talking about all this, when he asked if I was sad, I told him, I'm sad, but I can point to things, to so many blessings and so many goodnesses of God throughout, and so much mercy from the Lord throughout this whole time, even in the midst of chaos and in the midst of, uncertainty, there's always the Lord to go back to and just to stand on. And I told him about that, and I said, God has been really good to us, Michael. And he said, got it. He said, and so a few hours later, I had to go, but I looked at him. I looked in front of I stood in front of him, and I said, I love you. And he mouthed, I love you. And he puckered out his lips for a kiss. And that was the last time I saw him awake. Because as I said, arrangements were made for him to go to hospice on the Thursday. On Wednesday, both his sisters went to go see him, and they had a really nice visit. His sisters came back happy. Then on Thursday, I went to the hospice, which was just 5 minutes, not even 5 minutes from our house. But by the time I got there, he was sleeping. I guess he had been in a lot of pain when he got there, so they gave him medication, and he was sleeping. And I stayed there with him for a few hours, and then I went home. His mother came, and I went home. And I was still operating on this belief that he had a few weeks, because I had just been told that, the Tuesday, that Tuesday. But then my mother-in-law sent a message and said, he's not going to last the night. He might not last the night. And so I quickly packed up, and went to the hospice. And my mother-in-law was there, and she said that, I only know this because I was told, but people who are dying, their breathing gets really, how do I say this? It stops for longer, and then it go, and you know what I mean? Like there's long pauses between their breaths. And she said that he was doing that, but then when I got there, his breathing actually became a lot more consistent. And so she thinks that he would have gone, because she was there when both her parents died, and she said that she thinks he would have gone had I not showed up. But I sat there with him that night, and when I couldn't sleep anymore, I think I got up around 6 or 7. I couldn't, but I sat next to him, and I prayed, and I sang, I read scripture to him, and I sang hymns to him. And then his breathing got really, really shallow, really, really, really stunted, I should say, again. Before 8 a.m., he passed away. But the last thing I said to him, and I didn't know he was going to go I didn't think he was going to last much longer in the morning, but, the last thing I said to him was, I love you forever. And then he went, and he just stopped breathing, and he was gone. Yeah.
Wow, Grace, it's heartbreaking to hear that, and to hear your pain, and understand what you've been through as a family with your kids as well. But from the sounds of what you've said, there's still so much that you're thankful for, despite the struggle and the loss. The Lord has blessed you with so much.
Yeah, there is so much. There's so much beauty to be seen when you look at the Lord, or when you attempt to look at the Lord in whatever circumstances you're in. And there is there's always grace You know, there's always strength to be had. And knowing that, you know, I can't do it alone, and I can't survive alone. And knowing who I can look to has been really what has carried, what has helped me have perspective, you know. And it's not me, really. It's just the fact that, you know, I grew up knowing, or I grew up, you know, reading the Bible and studying the Bible. And so then when these things come up, you know what to do, you know where to go, you know who you can lean on. He's God has carried you through the little things, and you know He's not going to abandon you in the big things. But it's a matter of taking pause and looking around. And I just remember that verse, precious in the sight of the Lord are the death of His saints. And it doesn't say, well, it's only, peaceful deaths in bed from old age that are precious in the sight of the Lord.
Yeah.
No, all the deaths of the Lord's saints are precious. And I know that God doesn't take a life lightly, even though sometimes it feels like He does. I know that I've always known that that nothing is done without a reason, and God doesn't waste his time. Absolutely doesn't waste His time, but He doesn't waste our time either. Yeah.
Grace, what would you say? So I know often in challenging times, we learn and we grow the most if we allow ourselves to, which I know you have. What would you say has been, what have you learned about God, about yourself in or through this?
I've learned that, one of the fascinating things I've learned, I mean, the Bible talks about how God sees the end from the beginning, and we know that He's outside of time, right? And I mean, that's what we see when we see it all through the Bible, is how, God's telling you the future. He's telling you the future while and He's telling you the present and the past and the future, kind of all at once. And He's telling you things that are going to happen while things that He's already said will happen have happened, And one of the things I've learned, or really have been able to see, is that He prepares you for the walk that He has you on. And, it's just like, and you don't know what's going to happen in the future. But if you stop, if you spend your time wisely looking up at the Lord and seeking Him in obedience, you'll be prepared for it, and prepared to react in a way, in the way that, that the Lord would have you react. And I could really go on forever just talking about how the Lord brought such and such a person in my life to help prepare me for this, how the Lord did this to set me up for this, but it's there are no details that are too small for God, and there's a verse in I think it's First Chronicles. But David says to the Lord, "Thou knowest thy servant," and God doesn't treat everybody the same. we're all different as snowflakes, we're just different from each other. But God knows the exact way how to get our attention. He knows the exact way how to treat us. And he wants us to have the right responses. He wants us to respond in faith. He wants us to love him. He wants us to glorify him. And so he puts things into our lives and he prepares us to give us the best chance possible to react the right way, to bring glory to him, to show others that he is merciful and he is gracious.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like what you said, that God prepares us for our walk. That's very true. That's very true. What would you say is your one message? If you had one message to give, your one maybe key learning, I don't know how you want to interpret that, but if you had one message or, one message, what would it be?
I would say, pretty simply, would be to seek the Lord, but it's not simply seeking the Lord. It's not simply just seeking the Lord and seeing what he'll say, and then, well, if you like it, then you do it, kind of a thing. It's more submitting to the Lord and seeking him. What I have found throughout my life in so many situations is, or here, let me give an example I think that maybe most people can relate to, is the need to forgive somebody that has done you wrong. Often we look at that, if they've really hurt you, you look at it and you're like, there's no way I can forgive them. There's no way. But then you remember, well, Jesus said to forgive. And he doesn't say, well, unless they did something like this, unless they, he doesn't say that. He says, you are called to forgive. And so what I have learned in every situation is you need to decide to do right first. And that's when the Lord gives you the strength to do it, because we're facing situations and the Lord looks at us and says, well, what are you going to do? And so the example I give, forgiving, it's like, okay, well, I'm going to do right and I'm going to forgive and the Lord can take care of it.
Yeah.
Right. But you have to make that decision first to do right.
It's that will to obey, isn't it?
That will to obey. And you may feel like, all right, I'm going to, like you're angry, you don't want to, and that, and you just really want to, get your revenge or whatever. But in every situation, whether it's, needing to forgive or you're going through a tragedy, make the decision to do right. Make the decision that whatever, and sometimes it's just a matter of going to God and saying, God, I don't know what's going on here, but I want to hear from you. I want you to tell me what to do, and what you tell me to do, I'm going to do it. And that's what walking by faith is. It's, deciding to do right, diligently seeking God and deciding to do right before he even tells you to. And what I have found is that, these situations, and, I've been through these situations before, but not quite as raw and, painful as experiencing the death of a spouse. But, there are certain situations in life that they just strip you to your most naked spiritual self. It reveals exactly what you are.
Yeah.
So, and it's not always sad things, like it's like when your baby is born and you've got this little baby and it's wonderful, but, and you yourself, you're starving, but your child is starving. And like, what do? Like most
Feed
of us,
the child, yeah.
Feed the child, and you will exhaust yourself and starve yourself for the sake of that baby. And that shows you, and that reveals yourself to you. You're like, I didn't know I could be this selfless. I didn't know that I could give as much or love as much as I could. Right. And in those moments, and so in those really, there's really just deep moments that that just strip you down, and they reveal to you what you are. And most of us don't like it. Most of us don't. What's revealed, actually, I would probably say like 99.9% of the time, it's not pretty, but we have the Lord,
Yeah.
and we can change it. That's the beauty of being a human,
Yeah. Yeah.
is that we can change, and we can make the right decisions, and we can, even in our fallen state, turn and seek the Lord. And so my one message would just be to seek and submit to the Lord. It seems scary. It does. Because you feel like you're blind. But I think it was, Corrie ten Boom who said, I'm going to butcher this, but she said something like, don't be afraid to trust an unknown future to a known God. And you can rely on absolutely everything he says. When he says that I will be your strength, he told Abraham that I am thy exceeding great reward, and when he says that he will gather you under the shadow of his wings, you can believe those things. Those things are real, and those things are true, because you and your spouse may have a loving, wonderful relationship. But like in my case, like I don't have him here anymore, but I do have the Lord, and the Lord is the one real thing, the one true thing, the only thing that will always exist, that has always existed.
Thanks, Grace, for sharing that. It's a real beautiful reflection of your heart for the Lord, and I see your in your story your faithfulness to the Lord and being obedient to Him and submitting to Him and seeking and serving Him. It's really wonderful to see that even despite the stripping and the pain and the deep loss that you've experienced, that you're still able to hold your head high, and for the Lord, that you're serving Him and you're walking in obedience to Him. It's really powerful. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for letting me share.
No,
I know that we're not taught these things for ourselves. We're taught them for others, that we can help others. And you don't have to be afraid of the Lord's will in your life. It does hurt. It is painful, but at the same time, it's not wasted.
Yeah.
The one verse I love in Psalms is, "Thou tellest my wanderings." What does he say? "Thou tellest all my tears. Are they not in your book?" And and he talks about how our tears are in a bottle as well. And we are so precious to the Lord, and he records our tears, and he collects them. And he's not collecting them for nothing, and the treasure that we get in heaven is worth the pain that we go through here.
Absolutely.
If we just let the Lord do his will in our lives.
Yeah, for sure. And just stand down. Let Him do His thing. Yeah. Grace, I'm really conscious of the time. Before we wrap up, if any of our listeners wanted to reach out to you, what would be a good way for them to do that?
I suppose my email.
Okay.
I'm not on social media right now. But my email is just my first name, Grace, GRACE .Krestinsky, KRESTINSKI @gmail.com. And so, and I do check my junk mail. So if it happens to go there, I will notice.
Awesome. Cool. We'll add that to the show notes for sure. For sure. Grace, thank you so much for your time. I can't thank you enough for sharing your story and for being so honest and real with us and showing us your heart. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, and it was good to talk to you, Sada.
Yes, and you too.
And just like that, we have reached the end of another fascinating conversation. Now remember to check out Crowd Church at www.crowd.church, even if you might not see the point of church. You see, we are a digital church on a quest to discover how Jesus can help us live a more meaningful life. We are a community, a space to explore the Christian faith, and a place where you can contribute and grow. And you are welcome at Crowd Church. Don't forget to subscribe to the What's the Story podcast on your favorite podcast app, because we've got a treasure trove of inspiring stories coming your way, and we will basically hate for you to miss any of them. And just in case no one has told you yet today, remember, you are awesome. Yes, you are. Created awesome. It's just a burden you have to bear. What's the Story is a production of Crowd Church. Our fantastic team, including Anna Kettle, Sadaf Bainon, and me, Matt Edmondson, and Tanya Hutzalak, work behind the scenes tirelessly to bring you all these fabulous stories. Our theme song is a creative work of Josh Edmondson, and if you're interested in the transcript or show notes, head over to our website, whatsthestorypodcast.com, and whilst you're there, sign up for our free weekly newsletter to get all of this goodness delivered straight to your inbox. So that's it from all of us this week here at What's the Story. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a fantastic week wherever you are in the world. We'll catch you next time. Bye for now.